I had an affair with another woman because my wife was not interested in sex. My name is Michael, and I have always believed that marriage was a lifelong promise of love, understanding, and intimacy. Yet over the years, as Emily and I settled into the routines of everyday life, I began to feel a distance between us. It started small, a missed touch here, a quiet evening at home without conversation there, but eventually, that distance grew into a silent wall that neither of us knew how to tear down. It all began when I noticed that our shared moments, once filled with laughter and passion, had become sparse. Emily was tired from her long workdays, and our evenings together often turned into a quiet routine of watching television in separate rooms. I tried to talk to her, hoping to find a solution, but our conversations always circled back to the same point: her lack of interest in intimacy. I felt rejected and confused, wondering if I had done something wrong. In my heart, I longed for the closeness we once had, but the spark seemed to have faded. One day, while working late at the office, I met Sarah. She was new to our department, a friendly and open person who took the time to get to know everyone. In the midst of long work hours and shared coffee breaks, our conversations turned personal. Sarah listened with genuine interest when I spoke about my troubles at home, and she offered warmth and understanding that I had not felt in months. Slowly, I began to realize that her kindness filled a void that had been growing inside me for a long time. At first, I justified our connection as nothing more than friendly support. But soon, the emotional comfort I experienced around Sarah awakened a desire for intimacy that had long been dormant. I began to think about our interactions long after the workday ended. Every smile she gave me, every gentle word of encouragement, ignited feelings that I had almost forgotten existed. The more I spoke with her, the more I missed the emotional and physical closeness that had defined my younger days. One rainy evening, when the weight of loneliness pressed down on me like never before, I found myself inviting Sarah for dinner at a quiet restaurant. Our conversation flowed easily over simple dishes and soft candlelight, and in that moment, I felt alive again. That night, as we walked along a dimly lit street after dinner, I impulsively reached for her hand. The touch was electric, a mix of comfort and desire, and it marked the beginning of a journey I never expected to take. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with Sarah deepened. We met discreetly, always careful to keep our encounters hidden. With her, I found a renewed sense of passion and excitement. She listened to my feelings, and together we explored a side of intimacy that had been missing from my life for so long. I began to experience moments of happiness and fulfillment that contrasted sharply with the emptiness I felt at home. Yet as much as I cherished my time with Sarah, guilt crept in quietly. I was betraying the vows I had made to Emily. Even as I tried to convince myself that my needs were being neglected and that I deserved this connection, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was doing something wrong. My nights became a tug-of-war between the joy of new love and the sorrow of lost trust. I found myself lying awake, questioning if I would ever be able to bridge the gap that had formed between Emily and me, or if this secret would eventually shatter our marriage completely. In moments of solitude, I reflected on the choices I had made. I wondered how things had gotten so far off track. I realized that while I had been searching for physical and emotional closeness elsewhere, the real problem might have been our failure to communicate. Emily had been struggling with her own emotions and insecurities, and perhaps she too was a victim of our slow drift apart. I regretted not trying harder to understand her, not trying to reignite the spark that once burned so brightly between us. Eventually, the secret affair began to weigh heavily on my conscience. I knew that as long as I carried this burden, I was not living honestly with either woman. I decided that I needed to face the consequences of my actions, to be truthful about my feelings and the choices I had made. With a heavy heart, I sat down with Emily and shared everything: the loneliness, the unmet needs, and the affair with Sarah. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Emily listened in shock, her eyes welling with tears as the reality of my betrayal sank in. That conversation changed everything. While it hurt deeply to know that I had caused her pain, it also opened the door to a raw and honest dialogue about our marriage. We began to talk about our needs, our disappointments, and the ways we had both contributed to the growing distance between us. It wasn't an easy road to recovery, and there were many painful moments along the way. Yet, in facing the truth together, we started to rebuild a connection that had been lost. Looking back now, I realized that my affair with Sarah was not just an escape from a troubled marriage. It was a wake-up call. It forced me to confront the reality that even the strongest bonds need constant nurturing and honest communication. While I cannot undo the hurt I caused, I have learned that true intimacy can only be built on trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect. This chapter of my life remains a difficult lesson, a reminder of the fragility of love and the importance of never taking a relationship for granted. Caught my wife sexting. I had to make a throwaway account for this, but I need to share my story. I was married to my wife for 5 years, and we had started dating back in high school. For the majority of our marriage, things went smoothly. We had good communication, and we rarely fought. We lived in New York City, but often traveled to our hometown in New Jersey to visit our families and friends. Thanks to the PATH trains that connected the two states, these trips were easy and stress-free. One evening, my wife and I went out to eat in NYC. While we were at the restaurant, we unexpectedly ran into an old friend from school. Although we weren't best friends, we had always maintained a friendly connection, and that night we ended up trading numbers. In the weeks that followed, we met up with him a few more times. During these outings, he usually brought along his girlfriend, and at first, I appreciated that we were all spending time together as couples. With his girlfriend present, I felt reassured and didn't see any reason for concern. However, during our third meeting, I began to notice subtle changes. I observed that my wife was giving our old friend a bit more attention than usual. At first, I thought she was just joking around or being friendly. When I later asked her about these small flirtations, she brushed off my worries, saying that I was overprotective and that her comments were harmless. I tried to trust her, but the nagging feeling in my heart grew stronger with each encounter. The situation didn't improve during our next outings. I noticed more instances where my wife's behavior suggested that she was more than just friendly. There were smiles that lingered a bit too long, touches that felt too intimate, and jokes that carried a hint of flirtation. Although I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, the evidence kept piling up in my mind, making it harder to ignore the possibility that something was seriously wrong. A couple of weeks later, while I was making lunch at home, my wife left her phone on the kitchen counter as she went to the bathroom. My doubts and suspicions got the better of me, and I picked up her phone. That decision changed everything. I noticed a text message from our old friend, a text I wasn't expecting, because he usually called or messaged me directly to arrange plans. When I opened the message, I found a video attached that left me completely shocked. The video was explicit. It showed our old friend in a very intimate act squeezing lube on himself and pleasuring himself, while making distinct noises. I could clearly hear him clapping his balls with every stroke. My heart sank, and I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. As I continued searching through older messages on her phone, I stumbled upon a sex tape. The tape left no room for doubt. It featured my wife and our friend together in a passionate encounter. In the video, she was clearly involved with him, riding him while he moaned loudly. Every detail in that video shattered the trust I had placed in her. When my wife returned from the bathroom, I couldn't hold back any longer. I confronted her with what I had seen, and our conversation quickly escalated into a heated shouting match. Emotions flew high, and the room filled with anger, pain, and betrayal. In the midst of our argument, she coldly admitted that she felt our friend was a better man than I was. She claimed that I could not satisfy her in the way he did, and that I was not strong enough for her needs. Her words cut me deeply, and I felt a profound sense of loss and failure. The entire ordeal left me devastated. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, unable to process the betrayal. Later, after much soul-searching, I made the painful decision to leave our home and file for divorce. It was one of the hardest choices I have ever had to make. Thankfully, we did not have any children, which made the legal process a bit simpler, though it was still a very painful experience. We ended up spending a considerable amount on lawyers, but the proceedings went smoother than I had feared. I managed to keep the house, although I had to make some sacrifices along the way. Since the divorce, I have not found another girlfriend. The betrayal still stings, and I often find myself wondering why I wasn't enough for her. I question her words, and part of me even struggles to believe what she said about my shortcomings. Yet the evidence remains, and the pain is real. I share my story here not only to unburden myself, but also in hopes of getting some feedback from those who may have gone through something similar. This experience taught me a harsh lesson about trust and love, one that I never imagined I would have to learn in such a brutal way. I, 32, M, found out my long-term girlfriend, 30F, was cheating through her own texts. I never imagined I'd find myself in such a painful situation. For 6 years, Sarah and I had built a life together. We weren't just dating. We lived together, shared a joint savings account, and often talked about our future marriage, a home, maybe even children someday. It all seemed so natural. I trusted Sarah completely, believing that nothing could ever come between us. At first, the signs were subtle. Sarah began to change little by little. Her phone had more privacy settings, and she started going out more frequently with her work friends. At first, I chalked it up to stress from her demanding marketing job. I told myself that her long nights and extra outings were just part of her busy schedule. I even asked her about it once, and she laughed it off, insisting that I was overthinking. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But then things started to feel off. I began to notice a distance between us, a gap that wasn't there before. We would spend evenings together, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. My instincts told me that there was more to her behavior than just stress. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling and reassured myself that everything was fine, that I was simply overreacting. One evening, my friend Josh reached out to me with a message that would change everything. "Hey man, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I saw Sarah last night," he wrote. "She was with some guy. They were too close." Along with his message, he sent me a picture of Sarah at a bar. In the photo, she was laughing, leaning into a man, and her hand rested casually on his thigh. It wasn't explicit evidence of a full-blown affair, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. I felt sick and confused. There had to be an explanation. I tried to convince myself that there might be a misunderstanding. However, the image in Josh's message kept replaying in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. In a moment of weakness, I decided to check Sarah's phone while she was in the shower. I hated myself for doing it, but I felt desperate for clarity. What I found shattered my heart. Hidden under a different name in her contacts were flirty messages and secret plans to meet up. The text confirmed that Sarah had been having an affair for at least 3 months. 3 months during which I had been oblivious to what was really happening. My world turned upside down. The life I thought I shared with Sarah was built on lies. That night I barely slept. My mind raced with thoughts and emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew that I couldn't ignore the truth. The next morning, I sat Sarah down and showed her the messages on her phone. I asked her to explain herself. Sarah froze, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, I saw her searching for words, trying to come up with excuses. She started by saying, "It wasn't serious," and then tried to explain that she had been confused. Soon after, she blamed me by saying, "You've been so distant lately, and maybe you aren't in love with me anymore." It was as if she was trying to rewrite the past and shift the blame away from her actions. I listened to her, feeling numb and disappointed. There was no anger in my voice, only a deep, aching sadness. I simply told her to pack a bag and leave. Sarah burst into tears, tried to reach out and begged me not to make any rash decisions. But the decision had already been made in my heart. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on deception and betrayal. After she left, I was left alone with the memories of our life together. I had to sort out not only my feelings but also the practical matters of our shared life, dividing finances, figuring out what to do with our apartment lease, and planning for a future that was no longer shared. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done. In the weeks that followed, Sarah attempted to reach out to me. First, it was desperate apologies, then long-winded explanations, and eventually, nostalgic messages with pictures from happier times. Every attempt to rekindle what we had ended in me shutting her out. I felt that our past was tainted, and I no longer wanted to go back. I wasn't interested in endless apologies or trying to understand how everything went so wrong. One day, as I was shopping for groceries, fate brought us together by chance. I was in the frozen food aisle picking up some basics when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Sarah standing there, looking awkward and nervous, holding a basket full of groceries. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow down. I could see the hesitation and regret in her eyes, but I felt nothing stirring inside me, no anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of indifference. She managed a soft, "Hey, how have you been?" Her voice was tentative, as if she wasn't sure whether to approach me. I simply shrugged and said, "I've been good." I meant it. I had been focusing on myself, hitting the gym, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering hobbies that I had long neglected. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece. Sarah sighed and added, "I miss you." I looked at her for a moment, and then I replied simply, "I don't." There was no malice in my voice, just a quiet resignation. That brief exchange was enough to put an end to any hope of reconciliation. Without another word, I turned and walked away toward the checkout line. In the weeks and months that followed, I continued to adjust to the silence of living alone again. The transition from we to me was not easy, and there were days when I missed the person I thought I knew. However, I also learned that I could be strong on my own. I was finally free from the constant shadow of betrayal and the need to justify someone else's actions. Reflecting on the experience, I realized how fortunate I was to have discovered the truth before things could worsen. Some people told me I was lucky to have found out before we got married or started a family. And in many ways, I agreed. The pain of betrayal was intense, but it was better than living a lie for many more years. It allowed me the chance to rebuild my trust in myself. And eventually, perhaps, in someone else, though I was in no rush to do so. The entire ordeal taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of listening to one's gut feelings. I learned that even the most secure relationships can hide secrets, and that sometimes the signs of trouble are there long before you are ready to see them. I also learned that it's okay to put your own well-being first, even if it means walking away from a future you once dreamed of. Now, as I move forward with my life, I cherish the peace of being single and the freedom to focus on myself. I have rebuilt my routines, rediscovered my passions, and slowly started to believe in the possibility of new love when the time is right. I remain grateful for the support of friends and family who helped me through the darkest days, reminding me that my worth is not defined by someone else's betrayal. Sarah's betrayal changed my life, but it also set me on a path to self-discovery. I am no longer the man who was blinded by love and trust. I have grown into someone who knows the value of honesty and self-respect. Although the scars remain, they serve as a reminder of the journey I have taken from heartbreak to healing, from betrayal to self-empowerment. This is my story, a tale of lost love and the painful journey toward reclaiming my life. I share it not to wallow in sorrow, but in the hope that it might provide some closure or insight for anyone facing a similar situation. Remember, even in the darkest moments, there is a chance for a new beginning.